Hello, teachers, parents, and educational leaders, and welcome to this episode of Breaking Down the B.E.S.T. Now, during this episode, you will get a peek into the members-only area where I have tons of resources to help you make math fun, make it click, and make it stick. There should be a link somewhere around this video where you can learn more. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's get to it, and let's break down the standard. Welcome to Breaking Down the B.E.S.T, a video series dedicated to breaking down Florida's best standards for math. So grab something to write with and maybe even a snack. This looks good. And don't forget to put a smile on your face. There you go, I see you. And let's dive into today's best standard. Hey everyone, and thank you so much for joining me as we break down the following standard. Today's standard is MA.3.FR.2.2, and this standard says to identify equivalent fractions and explain why they are equivalent. So when we're talking about identifying, we're saying, hey, these fractions are equivalent, being able to look at fractions and to understand and identify that they are indeed equivalent. And equivalent means equal in value. So while they might look different in terms of what numbers are being used, they still might be equal in value. So we have a couple of examples right here. It says the fractions 1/1 and 3/3 can be identified as equivalent using number lines. Here is where 1 in the numerator and 1 in the denominator would be at the whole number of 1. And the same thing right here with 3/3. That also represents 1 whole. We could also say that the fractions 2/4 and 2/6 can be identified as not equivalent using a visual model. Here is 2/4 and here is 2/6. And you can see they are the same size whole, but 2/4 is greater than 2/6. By the way, this document that I'm marking up all over is not something that I created. This is something that the Florida Department of Education releases to the public. And in these episodes, I'm just showing you how I process and break down these standards in order to build and create the resources that are available to you with your Taking on the B.E.S.T membership. So we're going to spend about half of the video breaking down this particular standard today. And then in the second half, I'll show you what resources are specifically aligned to this standard. Let's keep going. All right, some clarifications right here. It says that within this benchmark, the expectation is not to generate equivalent fractions. This is something that we'll do in 4th grade, and that's like saying, okay, if we have a fraction 1/2, generate, produce, create a new fraction that's equivalent to that using the denominator of 6, let's say. So this would be a 4th grade example. We're not doing that here. We're given 2 fractions or more. We are provided with the fractions and then have to determine if they are equivalent or not. Fractions are limited to fractions that are less than or equal to 1. So we're not concerned with fractions that are greater than 1 or mixed numbers in this case. And the denominators, again, have the limits of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, and 12. Number lines must be given and scaled appropriately. You'll see that in some of the resources that I show you in just a minute. Okay, so this benchmark connects with the last benchmark, 3.FR.2.1. That is the plot, order, and comparing fractions. You can see it goes nicely because if they're not equivalent, that means that one is greater or less than the other. And the term provided here is the number line. We'll be using lots of number lines in this one. Where are they coming from in 2nd grade? Well, in 2nd grade, it says they provided this standard with composing and decomposing 3-digit numbers. And I was kind of like, I'm not really sure how that connects. I put a little question mark there. Maybe you see it right away, but I'm looking at that like, I'm not really sure how that one aligns with the other one. I do know that in 2nd grade, they did have to partition shapes into halves, thirds, and fourths, and that can be aligned with what we're doing here. I'm not really sure how the composing and decomposing 3-digit numbers applies here, but in 4th grade, we do have more practice with equivalent fractions, more intense practice with that, and also a plotting, ordering, and comparing fractions standard in 4th grade. So again, what they're learning about in 3rd grade is so vital because in 4th grade we do take it up a notch. All right, now for the purpose and instructional strategies section. Just some things that jumped out at me again were the appropriately scaled number lines and area models. And we want students to be to reason why fractions are equivalent using the models and not algorithms. By algorithms, they might mean, like, for instance, this is more of a 4th grade thing. But if we're saying, okay, if we have 3/4 and we're trying to see if that's equivalent to 6/8 in 4th grade, we will say you could multiply the numerator and the denominator by 2, and if you can do that, then they're equivalent. That would be an algorithm that we're using there. In 3rd grade, we're really focusing on the models, not really using the algorithms behind it, but really focusing on where does it look like with the models. Again, this is more of a 4th grade thing right there. This common misconceptions and errors, I felt like the wording was confusing. It says that students can confuse when numerators are the same in fractions, larger denominators represent smaller pieces, and smaller denominators represent larger pieces. I felt like this was confusing because that is true. It's saying that students might not understand that larger denominators represent smaller fractions. So this, right, just to clarify, this is true. Just the wording is a little bit confusing, and students might confuse that truth. They might have some hard time with that. For instance, if they have 3/8 versus 1/2, they might think, oh, 3 and 8, those are bigger numbers than 1 and 2. Therefore, 3/8 must represent a greater amount, right? But this is what we're trying to get them to understand is that 8s, that the larger the denominator, the smaller the piece. Okay, here are some instructional tasks right there. This says plot the fractions 6/4 and 3/2. And I'm looking at these two fractions and wondering why they are there, because it said that fractions are limited to less than or equal to 1. So be careful with that. I feel like that is going outside of the clarifications that they mentioned. These two, I would write this as oops. These are fractions should be less than or equal to 1 whole. This might just be an error or a glitch in the task that they're providing. So just be careful of that, because what I'm reading is that the fractions that we're comparing are supposed to be less than or equal to. So careful there. This one right here says use the area models below to determine whether they are equivalent. Well, we can tell by looking at it that they are not equivalent, because 2/6, for instance, right there, is less than 2/4. But the answer choices down here are very wordy, but it is a fair question. So it's really important that students are able to articulate why. Look at all the vocabulary in here. That the model shows that 2/6 and 2/4 are equivalent. Well, right there we can knock it out because they're not equivalent. But this is a common misconception that because they have two shaded parts, that maybe students would think that. Again, here we have are equivalent because the size of each whole is the same. That is true, but they're not equivalent there. Here we've got two not equivalents, and you have to be able to read them carefully. So again, really taking time to break down and read these items carefully is what could definitely trip students up. And this is an instructional item. Here, select all the fractions that are equivalent to a whole number. This is very, very helpful when we have models to show that land at a whole number of 1 or 2 or 3 and so on. Okay, so those are some examples of how this standard is. You can see it in action, but let's go ahead and see what you have access to with your membership. We are here at the website, McCarthyMathAcademy.com. We're going to go to Members Enter here and select Taking on the Best. And of course, we are looking at 3rd grade. So we'll click on 3rd grade, scrolling down to the fraction strand. and we are on 3.FR.2.2 equivalent fractions. And right away, the first page to come up are your bronze resources. These are your video lessons and student guides. This is where students can watch the video lessons and pause the videos to record the same notes onto their paper. So you can see right here, it says determine if 6/10 and 3/5 are equivalent by drawing an area model to justify your answer. And you can see the area model has been provided and it's marked and it's scaled appropriately. All they have to do is shade in 6/10 and 3/5 to determine, to justify if they are indeed equivalent. When we get to the silver resources, you'll get to see it a little bit larger there. Then we also have one equivalent fractions on the number line. Again, the fractions, the number line have been provided for the student, and you can see that they're all less than or equal to 1. And students, all they have to do is plot the points on the number line and use that information to determine, to justify if those two fractions are equivalent. Okay, and if we click on one, so you can see here with this video, you can easily full screen it. And we're marking up the text, we're marking up the number line, determining that 6/6, constantly saying that the whole number has the same numerator and same denominator, plotting the points. Right now we're marking up the number line for the fifths, seeing that 2/5 goes right there, and then justifying our work below. And if you have the silver plan, you can take the learning up a notch because students can use their notes in order to help them with the extra practice pages. So 2 video lessons with the bronze plan. Now, if you have a silver plan or the gold plan, you of course have access to these bronze resources. If you have the silver or the gold plan, you can click on the silver resources. And let's take a look. These are available right here. So we'll take a look at your printables. You can see here, this is all about the area models. It's the video lesson icon right there. It says determine if 3/8 and 2/4 are equivalent by drawing an area model. We will go through all of that in the video lesson. And then there's extra practice that follows that. The same kind of thing that we just did in the video lesson, but now it's handing over the responsibility to your students. Then again, we've got video lesson, extra practice, another video lesson with the number line that you find on the bronze page, and then your extra practice. And then the last 2 resources are your math missions and the math misconception mystery. So the math mission is like a math task. There's multiple parts to it. This one says use the number lines to determine a fraction with a denominator of 8 that is equivalent to 3/12. So here, this is kind of tapping into that 4th grade standard. We are generating an equivalent fraction here, but there are enough because we have the scaled number line. Really, all they have to do is plot 3/12 and then connect that to how many 8ths it would be. There's so much provided for them that it's not hitting quite the level of thinking that they'll need in 4th grade to generate that equivalent fraction. Then we'll take those 2 fractions and model them using area models to again prove that they are equivalent. And then here it says Carson says that 3/8 is equivalent to 3/12 because they both have the same numerator. Well, that doesn't make them equivalent, right? Explain Carson's error and use the number lines and area models that you have created to justify your reasoning. So you can see that there's a lot jam-packed into this, a lot of thinking required with the student and putting it into a real-world setting there. And then finally, we have the math misconception mystery. These are also, you'll see the video icon right there. If you go right here, you just click play on your silver page. And these math misconception mysteries are a hit with students. Once you watch one of these with your students, you are never going to be able to not watch them. Your students, I promise you, will beg you for them. When you press play, I will guide you through the whole process. I'll just say, okay, it's time for you to solve this problem on your own. After you solve it, you're going to watch 4 characters that are me dressed up in silly costumes with silly accents, solving that same problem 4 different times. 3 of the characters will make a mistake and only one of them has the correct answer. So it's a great opportunity for math discourse, for friendly debates, and then they will fill out this detective report at the end, which is super fun. And all of your answer keys for everything that we just went over in the printables is right here. So those are your silver resources. So if you have the silver package or the gold, you can access this. And then with the gold resources, if you have the gold plan, you have access to even more. You can go back to those video lessons at any time. You can go back to your silver resources that we just went over at any time. And for the gold, you also have access to a mini assessment specifically for this standard. So I know that your county might provide you with unit assessments, with mini assessments that you're using. So feel free to use these however you want to, as an additional reassessment or as practice, however you want to do it. There are about 4 to 5 questions per standard, and there's a variety of question types, all pertaining to the standard that we're looking for. So when you look at your data and you see that you have a student struggling with 3.FR.2.2, you have video lessons to back it up. You have extra practice, and then you can go ahead and have them reassess and see if they've got it. Just so you can see, we've got the number lines there. We've got area models. Here's one that was super wordy, like the problem that we went over in the standards earlier in this episode. Okay. So you can take a look at that. There's also the answer key right here. As a gold member, you also have the perk of having these episodes, these breaking down the best episodes right here with the standards, so you can easily navigate and see what you have access to. Now these episodes are also available on YouTube. They just have ads. So it's a nice little perk of being a gold member. But really, if you're a gold member, it's because you wanted access to McCarthy Math 155. This is a daily math intervention that's aligned to the Common Core standards. This is what we were using before the B.E.S.T standards came out. And yes, there are enough changes in the B.E.S.T standards. That's why I created a whole new program for it. But there are so many video lessons in McCarthy Math 155 that you can still use and that can still help you and really break it down. If you have students who are struggling, this is the way to go to support them even more. So let's click on that. The 155, by the way, it stands for 155 video lessons. So when we click on 3rd grade, you can see there's all different kinds of units going on. We've got place value, adding and subtracting, multiplication, 2-step word problems. Whoops, I didn't mean to click that. And then right below it tells you the number of video lessons. So for 2-step word problems, that is a tough one in 3rd grade. There's 10 video lessons right there on 2-step word problems. But we are looking at fractions, where there are 24 video lessons. So these are all about fractions, modeling fractions using area model, using a number line. Fractions involved in other kind of shapes. Okay, modeling fractions that are greater than 1. Trying to see if we can get to, here we go, fraction equivalence and comparison. So it's kind of going with the last standard and this standard. And in this one, not so much using number lines, but using area models and cross multiplication to check, not to solve it the first time, because we want our students to know and understand and feel good and confident about their fractions. The best way to do that is with a visual, but using cross multiplication to check just to make sure that both are okay. Okay, so you can see there's a bunch of them. There's like 5, a whole bunch. And then here are fractions that are equivalent to a whole. Okay, so many video lessons. So if you have students that are struggling, the gold plan is the way to go with that. All right, I think that is it. So I hope that you found this video to be helpful in understanding what the standard is, what is expected of your students, and now what resources you have available to you that are strategically aligned to this standard. Before you go, I just want to remind you that what you choose to do with your life every day, it really does matter. Thank you so much for stepping into the best version of yourself every day so that students can be inspired to do the same. And I especially want to thank you for inviting me into your educational space. I truly love being able to support you in any way that I can. All right, I know that you're busy, so I will see you in the next episode, okay? All right, bye. Okay, so I know that I just said goodbye for now, but I'm gonna ask you to do one more thing, okay? If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with your teacher friends or other leaders in education. That's how I get to continue doing what I love to do, which of course is supporting you all to the best of my ability. All right, for real now. Bye.